Welcome to Sioux Line's Latta Subdivision. It is set in the early 1990s in southern Indiana. This is all ex-Milwaukee Road territory that the Sioux acquired when they merged. We'll start out in Latta Yard, just south of Jasonville, Indiana. The lifeblood of the subdivision is coal. We'll follow a few of its coal operations today. You gotta love the sound of that GP38-2. It is Bunami with a scale sound system speaker. We're going to follow it on a short run out to the Lewis Dock coal loadout. It is leaving Latta Yard with a short train of empties. It will exit out the north end of the yard and head through Jasonville. This is a relatively new loadout. There isn't much to it, just a control tower and a conveyor. There's also a safety structure by the tower to prevent the conveyor from being accidentally dragged into the tower. All the coal is trucked in. Here we catch up with the local as he's being backed into the siding with some empties. The land around here is mostly flat farmlands. To some it may seem strange seeing coal mined in such an area. That is how it is for Illinois basin coal. Well, most of the coal is in Illinois. There's a lot in western Indiana too. Our unit uncouples and runs around the siding to pick up the loads on the other end. The GP38-2 is an ex-Milwaukee unit. I added ditch lights and a larger fuel tank to the Genesis model.
Here it is, coupling up the loads and heading back to Latta Yard. The joints in the backdrop show edges of the removable section that hides our home's electrical panel.
This is a map of the subdivision. One interesting coal route is entirely on the sub. It runs from Hawthorne Mine on the Conrail-Vincennes branch up to the PSI generating station north of Terre Haute. Here we see the XL, as it is called, running through Jasonville. All the buildings in this scene were scratch-built or kit-bashed to represent the buildings as they were. The coal hoppers are 70-ton antiques owned by PSI, Public Service Indiana. They'll be retired in a few years, but for now they are neat throwbacks to an earlier time. All our Atlas models repainted and weathered to match the prototypes. These Genesis GP38-2s have stock speakers. Can you tell the difference in sound from the Bunami and scale sound systems? Next, we will follow a very short coal route. It might be 20 miles one way from the Minnehaha mine to the Indiana Railroad interchange. From there, the loads are taken to Indianapolis. Start off in Latta Yard, where the crew grabs a couple of Sioux Line bandits. These are ex-Milwaukee units. This engine house is also original Milwaukee, as is the sanding tower. Kind of a time warp, except for that SD60M. The units head out the south end of the yard to pick up empties at the Indiana Railroad. That curved track in the background is the Latta branch. Past a farm and an old abandoned barn. The actual railroad line is straight as an arrow, but my basement necessitated some curves. Now the jeeps pull up to the crossing with the Indiana Railroad in Linton and stop to throw the switch into the yard. These targets actually rotate when the switch is thrown. I added that feature on the turnouts on this new part of the layout. Now the units cross the highway and enter the interchange yard. This part in Linton can get pretty backed up when the railroads are switching the yard.
Jeeps spend a few minutes putting their train together, sometimes blocking Main Street. The folks of Linton aren't too happy about this arrangement, but tolerate it. The first 3 cars were scale trains 4-bay hoppers. They came decorated for Ipalco. That was an earlier scheme from the 1970s, so I made some artwork for IPL, which is Indianapolis Power and Light, and William Brillinger printed the decals for them. Technically, the whole train should be made up of those, but I don't have that many 4-bay hoppers that are correct. Do I make up some using the Walters 4-bay hoppers, which are close but not quite? I'm not sure yet, but I'll see. Once the train is made up, it heads back to Latta, exiting the Linton Interchange Yard and across the Indiana Railroad Diamond. There are still a few Milwaukee Road switch stands left, mostly in yards. The train makes some time through the woods and fields between Linton and Jasonville. At least this time you get to see the whole train, limited to about 13 or 14 cars due to the loadout and yard capacity. The real trains were about 50 cars. Now we get back to Latta Yard and align the switch to the yard and the lat branch. You would think they would have been more original with their naming. Latta Sub, Latta Yard, Latta Branch. Anyway, we get on the Y that takes us onto the branch. The real Latta Branch was on the west side of the yard, which will put it in the aisleway in the basement. I had to reverse it to make it work in our basement. In the background, you can see the abandoned in place rail line of the Peabody Coal Company. The train now proceeds down to Helens. It's a 28-inch radius, 2.2% grade. Won't try to put any auto racks on this, it's just for standard height cars. 3 turns gets us down to the lower level where the Jeeps pop out in the woods. The Latta Branch is not a well-maintained stretch of track. 10 or 20 miles per hour is the most on this branch. This was originally a branch line to Sullivan, Indiana, but was cut back years ago and only serves the Minnehaha mine in the 1990s. The train creeps across Big Branch Creek. Even though the branch is currently abandoned, the trestle is still there, which we measured a while ago. The creek is 2-part epoxy, and the scum layer on top is a precisely applied layer of dust. The branch curves around a bend by a mobile home across a back road. Although the scene might be finished, I think that mobile home needs some junk around it. Finally, we pull up to the Minnehaha loadout. First, the train goes by the switch for the runaround track. The layout here is only about 1 foot wide. The backdrop's a photo print I made from my own photos, stitched together, and printed at the UPS store. Now the train is approaching the actual loadout. I have to make sure the chute to load the coal is out of the way for the locomotives. Otherwise they go bonk. Not too realistic. The locomotives are now on the other side of the loadout. Train and run around it. We have to make sure the turnout is set back to the main route so that the whole train can be pushed down the line. The loadouts are made from 6-inch drain pipe, which is just about the correct size for the prototype. The real loadouts are much taller than the upper deck allows. The rest of the mine structures are in the aisleway, so I didn't have to model them. The bandits finish running around their train. They couple up and then push the whole train toward the loadout. Taking the front of the loadout off so I can see the actual loading of the cars. The train is pushed to the front of the first coal car. Then I lower the chute so that it is matched the top of the coal hopper. I turn on the coal and set the locomotive to speed step 1. Even at that slow rate, it's a little nerve-wracking to get the coal turned off and on so that I don't overload or underload the car. The on-off is a sliding plate controlled by a tortoise inside the loadout. I have to turn off the coal when the car is just over half loaded, or the extra coal in the chute will overflow the car. However, if I do overload it, it isn't much of an issue since there is an open floor under the chute, and the bin underneath it collects the overflow coal. Coal is Walter's lump coal, which is not rock-based. I think it is cork that is dyed black. If it was actual rock, I am not sure the train could be pulled up helix. Oh, look, I stopped the coal at this point, and it's just loading from the end of the chute. I just went over a little bit there. Oh well, I think the prototype does the same thing. My concept for this loadout came from the YouTube channel of NS Mahler24 and his Norfolk Southern layout. Do a search for NS Asheville District to learn more about building a loadout like this. It's the last car, and then it's back to Latta Yard. Once again by the mobile home. Tom Johnson inspired a number of scenic aspects on this layout. Particularly, he suggested painting the road and continuing right onto the backdrop so that it's continuous. Also, he suggested painting the tops of the trees on the backdrop on the cut line so that that cut line was blurred. I took all the photos of my backdrop and printed them at the UPS store. Even though the paper is matte, the colors have good saturation, which is what I was looking for. Back in Latta Yard, and soon back on the main line to go to Linton. These GP40s are from Atlas with economy decoders and iPhone speakers. They aren't bad, but I do hope Scale Trains Rapido or Class 1 comes out with a production run of Bandits. It couldn't be that hard since they are already doing Milwaukee units. One interesting thing about these units is that the dynamic brake fans were removed. Blisters are still there, but the fans are gone. These are in the 2000 series, and one of these is 2026, which came that way from Atlas. That's a nice nod to this year. Now we're back at Linton. I do like the Tomar signals and flashers. Controls for them are by logic rail. Aside from having to solder in some contorted positions under the layout, they were real easy to set up. The GP40s will break up the train and fill each of the 3 tracks of the yard. Most of the cars are 100-ton Bethlehem 3-bay hoppers made by Walters. LeSue and Milwaukee purchased these in a few different paint schemes, and even patched up some from other railroads purchased secondhand. More inspiration for the layout came from Lance Mendheim. His scenery is amazing. One important planning step that he suggests is that less is more. By that, the layout looks more realistic if you don't try to cram a lot of stuff in. I try to keep that in mind when developing the scenery. For instance, town of Linton has precisely one house in the layout and a couple of signal bungalows. That's it. The rest of the town is in the backdrop. I like the open areas, which give a feeling of countryside. Turnouts in this section of the layout are fast tracks with over-center springs to hold them in place. These things are bulletproof. The switch stands are detailed west. Linking those to the turnouts is time-consuming. I think each stand and linkages took about an hour to build, but in the end I think it was worth it. The rest of the track is microengineering flex track, code 83. Ballast is Arizona rock and mineral. Dirt was collected from a local road and then sieved to get the finest texture I could. The grass is Woodland Scenic's light green and medium green in various lengths. The trees are super trees from Scenic Express with their leaf flake applied. Once finished with all the switching, I threw the turnout and the GP40s head back to Latta to tie up. Quite a busy day for them and on the Latta sub. It's a rather long description of coal operations. I hope you stayed entertained. However, I still have a little bit of work to do. Time to empty the coal cars and then replenish the Minnehaha loadout. At least the loadout is directly below the yard.